Hi everyone, my name is Abby Stein and I'm here with a foreword. I want to share with all of you some Jewish texts and sources that are very personal to me. I was raised in an ultra-orthodox Hasidic Jewish community. Growing up, we had a very strong focus on studying, researching, questioning, finding answers in texts. And while at the time it was very limited of which kind of questions and which kind of texts we can read, already from a young age, as I was trying to make sense of my identity, living in a community where everyone claimed that I was a boy or supposed to be a boy, and I disagreed with that pretty much since I remember myself, I turned to text. When I was already 15, and I described that a bit more in detail in my book, I discovered, which at the time was a Kabbalistic text, that for the first time, and if I translate word for word, one of the lines was, "At times a female will be in a male body." And that was a line that for the first time ever gave me any sense that who I am might be valid at all, and specifically within the context of Judaism. I've since, let's just say, moved on, but also moved on with a lot of that background. And while I don't think that we need text to justify who we are, I think anyone who walks up to me and tells me I accept you as a trans person because I found a text that told me to do that, I will be very cautious with something like that. But I do think that they create something so beautiful and powerful. And for me, that is within Judaism, within the culture, the religion, and the background that I grew up and that I grew to love as an out and proud trans woman. And I'm hoping that looking at these texts and sharing them could help us all, if we wish, to find a space for us within Judaism to learn to not tolerate who we are, but to celebrate who we are. The first text that I want to share is a Midrash. So this is a Midrash Rabbah, which is called. It's in Bereshit. It's chapter 8 in the first part of that Midrash. And they're referring to the creation story. So the Midrash, kind of as a way of trying to make sense of what really happened here, and I want to read a small part of this in the original. Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, a rabbi said, "B'shah shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Adam HaRishon," when God created the first person, Dayo Partzufim Baro. First we have Rabbi Yirmiyah, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah. The first person was created, and the word that he is using, androgynous, which is usually translated androgynous, the same word of Greek origin that we use today to talk about androgyny. The first person was created an androgynous. Hadahu dichtiv, zachar nekeveh bara'am. He refers to a verse in Bereshit Aleph, in the first chapter of Genesis, where it says that one person was created and that one person was male and female. So his response to how is it possible for one person to be male and female, that person was actually androgynous. Then comes the second rabbi, Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachman, who said, "B'shah shebara HaKadosh Baruch Hu et Adam HaRishon," when God created Adam, he was created Dayo Partzufim. That first person was created with two faces, one kind of, I guess, what we would call male and one female. And then at a later point in creation, they were split into two. And he actually argues, and this is why this Midrash is so interesting, also from a pure commentary perspective, because he actually argues that that is the simple meaning of the word that is usually translated into rib. It doesn't actually talk about ribs, but it's talking about one person, this androgynous person, that kind of had both, and there was one side, what we would perceive as male, and one side as female. What I find to be so powerful is the simple reality that the rabbis realized 2,000 years ago, that if we want to talk about gender, we need to understand one thing. It is not black and white. And we'll see a lot more about that soon. I want to tell you all a story. Well, many stories, but one story. Over the past 4 to 5 years, I've had the privilege and honor to deliver somewhere around 4 or 5 or more, 4 to 500 or even 600, I don't know, I lost track a while ago, of speeches and public talks. Originally, most of them were in person. Obviously, over the past 16 months during COVID, it was mostly virtually. One of the texts that I've shared many, many times, hundreds of times, literally, if anyone doesn't believe me, just do a quick Google search by my name and you will see I have done that many events. I'm not surprised by now, but I always tell people that as much as I don't really enjoy as an educator to tell my students that they are wrong, to say that Judaism only recognizes two genders is 100% wrong. And in the Talmud alone, there are different mentions of at least 6, possibly 8 different genders, and possibly even more depending on interpretation. There's one specific text that I love, and I'm going to paraphrase it kind of, but the full text, you can look it up. It's Bikkurim, chapter 4, and it's the first Mishnah and the 5th Mishnah. This Mishnah says, listen, there are people who are in some ways equivalent to women, in some ways men, in some ways they are both, in some ways they are none. And then we have a different opinion, Rabbi Meir, who says that androgynous is a whole different category. It's neither male nor female. It doesn't fit into this binary. Because what becomes so powerful is the attitude towards gender, the basic understandings that the rabbis had 2,000 years ago, which what we would consider more progressive than far too many politicians today, that gender isn't black and white. So this is a text from the Zohar that I want to read, addressing this specific question. Can we pinpoint to something that it's better to be masculine, it's better to be feminine? How are we really obligated to live? Dahakol barnash ba'ul ishtakha dachar v'nukva. Every person needs to be male and female at all times. And only in that way, the Zohar continues, the only way to live with the Shekhinah, which is usually perceived as the feminine aspect of God, but specifically in this context, there's an obligation for every person to be with the divine at all times, according to the Zohar. And in this specific text, they argue the only way to do that is if you are able to balance for yourself masculinity and femininity at all times. They go even into talking the next part, which roughly talks about how when someone is at home, they can accomplish that if they are in a straight marriage. It's like someone who is perceived as man, someone who is perceived as woman, and they're married together. And if they bring the divine into their life, they can have that balance through both of them. But what's so interesting and what I love about this text is that it's just a casual, what I see as a casual nod to, I guess, LGBTQ people beyond just gender, saying that there are ways to accomplish that balance that the Zohar sees as this divine connection without necessarily this heteronormative marriage. Because as long as we are focused on that, as long as we recognize that we all have parts that could be considered masculine, could be considered feminine, we just need to learn to balance them and do what works best for us. The reason why I wanted to share these texts, as I mentioned, is not because I think we need them to justify who we are. These texts are showing us that there is space in Judaism not just to accept, not to tolerate. What these can show us is that there is space in Judaism to celebrate LGBTQ people, not in spite of who we are, but because of who we are. And if anyone ever tries to tell you that they know exactly what God or the Bible wants, just send them some of these texts. I'm not saying there's going to be a lot of answers, because none of us know everything. But at least it's enough to show everyone that the one thing straight about gender is that it ain't straight. Thank you.